Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for our Sprinkler Spruce Up Lunch and Learn. We've got a few people who are coming in, so we'll give them a couple of minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started a little bit with some housekeeping things. So my name is Angie Marcus, and I am the Water Efficiency Program Supervisor here at Cobb County Water System. And we just want to thank you for coming and thank you for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about sprinklers and everything sprinkler related and different types of sprinklers, some of the issues that you may encounter in your yard and your landscape with sprinklers, and some solutions to those problems, as well as how to make your sprinkler system and your irrigation system a little bit more efficient for you to save you some time and some money. Now, hopefully you can hear me. Should be able to hear me just fine. And see me as well. If you can't hear me or see me, if you want to type something in the chat box, we can hopefully get it figured out for you and I can problem solve on our end. So as we get started, we're going to go over a few just webinar housekeeping things that we've all probably done 1,000 of these virtual meetings by this point in time. So these should all sound pretty familiar to you and should be pretty easy to follow along with. So if you have any questions during our webinar, please put those down in the chat box, which should be at the bottom of your screen or the bottom right of your screen. If you've got any problems, then you can type those in the chat box too. We have the great Chrissy behind the scenes teching for us that she can help you with some common issues that we have, audio, video issues, anything like that. So just type all of that into the chat box. Any questions that we have will be answered at the end if we have time for those. If we don't have time for those, then I will make sure to include it in the email that I'm going to send out to all the participants. We'll be sending out, we've got a couple of links in the program, as well as we're going to have some questions that we're going to ask you. And so we'll send those out as well and some other information a little bit later. And we're going to email that to you. So in a couple of days, this presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel. It takes a little bit to get it downloaded and formatted and edited, the beginnings and the ends, but it will be up on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. Please make sure that you are on mute, that you've got yourself on mute so that you can hear and everybody else who's in the webinar can hear as well. The easiest way to see me is to make sure that I'm the center of the screen is if you go to the top right, it should say layout. And in that layout, you want to have it stage view. And if you click on the stage view, that should make it to where it pins me to the middle and you can still see the top people, but most people have got their cameras off, so you'll be able to see me as well. Or stack view works as well, either one of those. And you can also, on the top right of my picture, there should be 3 dots. And if you click on that, you should be able to pin is what it says. So pin me to your screen so that it keeps me as the main focus. All right, so I think we've got most people have come in and joined us. So we are going to start our webinar and we are recording this so that we can put it up on our YouTube channel later. All right, so what are we going to be doing today? So we've got, and if we have technical difficulties at any point in time today, I might be talking to Chrissy. And Chrissy, if you want to change the view, so we might be talking to each other a little bit, but we'll jump right back in there. So what are we going to do today? So our agenda for today is we're going to be covering some landscape watering needs, like what might your landscape need and how might you be watering it? And we're going to be looking at your irrigation system at a glance, some common problems that you might have, what's in your irrigation system. A lot of people don't even know that. The different types of components and what you might have that makes up your irrigation system, some improvements that you might want to make to your irrigation system, as well as some repairs that can help make that system as efficient as possible and not have it wasting water, have you wasting money, because if you're wasting water, it's coming out of your water bill, and so it's you wasting money as well. We're also going to be giving away a few outdoor water conservation kits, and these outdoor water conservation kits, they've got the 3 items that you see on the screen. It is a rain gauge that can tell you how much water we've had lately, because around this area, established plants only need 1 inch of water per week. So that rain gauge is a great test of if you've had that 1 inch of water, you don't need to be using your irrigation system on those established plants. It'll also have a hose timer. That's the blue with the orange top. That actually will screw into an outside spigot. If you don't have like an installed irrigation system, can give you an type of irrigation system style that it will screw into the outside spigot, and then you can put a hose onto the other end and hook it up to a sprinkler. And you can time it, so you time it for 10 minutes, and that way you don't forget to turn that sprinkler off. I don't know about y'all, but I frequently will turn on the sprinkler and then get busy doing something else, completely forget about it, and then I've watered my plants for too long. So that timer helps to shut off that sprinkler. And you'll also receive a hand water sprayer. So that hooks onto the end of the hose, and you can water your plants by hand. So at the end of each section, how can you win one of these? At the end of each section, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So there's 2 questions at the end of each section. The more questions you answer, the greater chance you have of winning. So for the 2 questions at each section, each answer that you send to me, if it's correct, will get entered into a drawing. So there will be 4 winners will be chosen from the correct answers, and you're going to email me your answers at angie.marcus@cobbcounty.org by 5 o'clock tonight. And Chrissy has put my email address in the chat box too, so if you miss it, I move on from the slide and you haven't gotten it written down yet, it's in the chat box for you. And make sure when you send me that email with your correct answers that you include your full name and your mailing address so we can send those to you in the mail. All right, so we're going to get started. That's what we're covering today. So let's think about your sprinkler system as a whole and the entire system that's out there in your yard. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the components and how they hook into your irrigation system and how you can use them and some of the problems and how it hooks up to your water line and the whole system as a whole. So what does a sprinkler system do? Well, a irrigation system, a sprinkler system, is basically just trying to replicate rainfall. So it's trying to water your landscape as efficiently as possible to make sure that you maintain your yard and your plants and your lawn nice and healthy and pretty. And so that's all that it's doing, is replicating rainfall when we don't have the rainfall. But there is a key in what I just said, and that key is efficiently. So you want to make sure that you are using as little water as possible to get the best job done for your irrigation system. So a lot of people, they know that they have those irrigation system timers, and that timer might be a box that's hooked up in your garage. It might even be outside by the system that you might have everything outside. So that irrigation timer typically has a scheduler on it, and you can schedule when it waters and how much it waters and for how long you water it. That's all that timer does, is it controls when and how long that your irrigation system runs and you water your landscape. And we've got lots of technology that can help make using this timer easier for us. Things like weather sensors, temperature sensors. So if it's raining, temperature sensor will signal the timer and the irrigation system that it doesn't need to come on. So you're not watering your lawn and your plants when it's raining outside. Let nature do its job and use that rainwater. If it gets too hot, if the temperature gets above a certain temperature, it might kick that irrigation system on an extra day to make sure that it's getting the extra water when the temperatures get hotter. But what about hand watering? Remember, one of those things we're giving out in those outdoor conservation kits is the hand water, is the nozzle. Hand watering is actually the most efficient type of watering that you can do. And the reason for that is that the water goes exactly where you want it to go, and it goes where it needs to go, where you want it to go, and for how long that it needs to go. You're not going to stand out there with the hose on and leave it on and stand there for an hour. But you might leave that irrigation system on, especially if you don't have one of those timers and the shutoff. Leave it running and forget about it, and it runs for too long. And if you think about an irrigation system, if you've got a small section that needs water, if you use that hand nozzle, it can definitely spray right on that section that you need it to and not go everywhere. So even though hand watering may be the most efficient, sometimes it's not the most convenient because you do have to stand out there and hold the nozzle the whole time that you're watering. So when you look at your sprinkler system, because that's that convenience is a lot of times where the sprinkler systems come in, that you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to think about and worry about watering. But when you look at your sprinkler system, if you look at the box that's usually got the sensor in it and the timer in it, there'll be wires coming out of it, and those wires typically are different colors, and each one of those colors goes to a section of your sprinkler system or a valve. So when the valve comes on, it should water just that one section. And you can actually set your system so that different valves open for different times and at different times. So whether it's your turf grass, like your lawn, your vegetable garden, native plants, trees, the system should only water that one section. And that's because all of those sections have different water needs. Like grass, your lawn, that's just your nice yard, should be watered by itself because it's the highest water user of all of the plants. So it takes the most water to water that lawn. And if you think about that, it also needs to be watered more often. So you might have to water that lawn, especially in the summer when it's really hot. You might have to water that lawn 5 or 6 times a week, like 5 or 6 days a week. And if you've got a potted plant, you might only need to water that potted plant a day or two because they take less water, a couple of days. If they are getting the same amount of water, so if your irrigation system, when it runs, is watering your lawn and those flowers or that vegetable garden or those potted plants, you might be overwatering those plants and then they're going to die. Or if you're setting it for the vegetable garden, it's also watering the lawn, then it might not be getting enough water and it might not keep that lawn alive. So that's where using your controller and checking your schedule at the beginning of each season, it becomes really important because in the summertime, it's going to need more water. In the wintertime, you might not need to water at all. And making sure that you change that controller and that schedule based on the seasons and based on the time of the year, and as well as sometimes the weather. If it's a particularly rainy summer, you might not need to set it for the summer schedule. Hydrozoning. What is hydrozoning? Hopefully your landscape is hydrozoned properly. All hydrozoning is simply grouping your plants together in regards to watering needs, sun exposure, type of soil, all the things that those plants need. And sometimes you need to think about where a plant will grow best in your yard and not necessarily where it's going to look the best. You may want to have this beautiful plant out in the middle of your yard because it's gorgeous and it's going to look beautiful there. But if it needs shade and not very much water and you're putting it in the middle of your lawn, then it's going to be in the sun and it's going to either get way too much water because you're watering your lawn for your lawn needs, or your lawn's not going to be getting enough water. So think about, we're back. Sorry about that, everybody. It looks like the audio went out for just a second. But it looks like we're back. So what we were talking about was hydrozoning. So grouping those plants together to make sure that when you plant them, you're actually watering them in the proper amount, and you don't have to worry about one little section needing more water than another section. So that's what hydrozoning is. So let's get into the irrigation system components. We're going to learn a little bit about how all the pieces work together, how efficient they are. Your irrigation system shouldn't be a scary thing, but you should be managing it and making sure that you're getting the most out of your time and your money. There's a lot of different options for irrigation systems and things that you can use for your irrigation system. There's a lot of little parts and pieces that over time they can wear down and break, and it just doesn't work as well, and you're not getting as efficient of an irrigation system. And sometimes things in your yard change, and you need to change your irrigation system to make it more efficient. Like if you cut down a tree and suddenly what was in the shade is now in the sun. And so things like, or if you change your planting a little bit, you might need to adjust that irrigation system. And so those are some of the things that we're going to look at today. So this is an example layout of a sprinkler system. And all of those little circles that you see, it looks like a whole lot of Venn diagrams there, but all of those little circles are how your sprinkler heads spray the water. So if you look in the middle of the bigger circles, you'll see that little circle. That little circle is where the sprinkler head actually would be. And then the bigger circle is actually where the water sprays. So it's the spray area. And in order to have a really efficient system, you actually need this kind of complete coverage, because just like a Venn diagram, if you've got circles that are next to each other, then there's going to be gaps in between. And so you actually want where they spray to be overlapping to have this complete coverage like this. And if you end up with, you start having missing sprinkler heads, if they get broken and you don't repair them, or they're not working, you're going to be losing a lot of the efficiency of that sprinkler system, and you're not going to be getting the coverage in your landscape that it needs in order to thrive. If the system's not working properly, like if you're missing those sprinkler heads, what a lot of people will do is they will just run their sprinkler system for more time, thinking that it's going to move the water from one place to the other. But if I have more water out there, it's going to cover more area, right? Well, your sprinkler head's only going to cover the area that it covers. So no matter how much longer you water it, you're going to have that water typically is going to run off because it's not going to be able to soak into the ground, and you're still going to be missing those spots in between the sprinkler head spray. So if you also don't have proper spacing, you've got to make sure they're in that proper spacing, that they're not too close so you're not overwatering, but they're close enough that they are getting that overlap. Again, you want to think of your irrigation system kind of as a Venn diagram, that they all overlap each other. So you might have a few different types of irrigation systems and irrigation types and the irrigation heads in your landscape. So the first one we're going to look at is spray heads. And spray heads are really good for small and irregular shaped areas. So they usually will pop up out of your ground. Sometimes you can't see them, sometimes you can see them a little bit and then they pop up. But sometimes they'll pop up anywhere from 2 to 12 inches. And they basically spray a continuous stream of water. And you can sometimes change what direction it sprays and make sure that it sprays the correct direction. But each sprinkler type needs a certain level of pressure. And just like you might have to regulate the pressure that goes into your house because to protect your appliances in the house, if you get too high of pressure, like it can blow out the inside of your toilet and it wears it down a lot faster. Sprinkler systems are the same. They need a certain amount of pressure in order for them to work correctly, but too high of pressure is going to create a lot of misting and a lot of inefficiency and can actually wear the inside of the sprinkler system and the components inside of it down faster. If you've got too high of pressure, you might notice fogging or misting in your system, and basically you don't have an efficient system because it will evaporate before it hits the ground, or sometimes the wind will blow it away. So these spray heads, they apply water really, really quickly, so you don't have to actually run them as long. But when they come, they need a little bit lower pounds per square inch, which is the amount of pressure. So they're at 15 to 40 psi's. And when they come out of the box, they rate about 70 to 75% efficient. And there are things that we'll talk about in a little bit that can help make those spray heads more efficient to get a little bit more bang for your buck. So the next one you might have is rotors. Now, rotors are that typical you think about when you think about irrigation systems. Think about a football field, and when they irrigate the football field, it covers a large area. These rotors are typically for large grass areas, sometimes slopes, sometimes planters if they're really large planters. These rotors can spray the water because they've got higher pressure. Their PSI is anywhere, depending on how far you want it to go, from 25 PSI to 100 PSI. So they've got a lot more pressure coming out, and they can go anywhere from 15 to 100 plus feet from that sprinkler head that water goes. So, and basically it throws the water out in one big stream, and the sprinkler head will actually oscillate, so it moves as it sprays. So it just stays in one big stream, and then it just moves as and goes back and forth. But because it's such a high amount of water and that pressure is so high, it can't go further. So if you've got a large lawn, these might be a good idea for that. The manufacturer specs are actually higher than the spray heads. They run about 80% efficient. And one of the reasons for that is because it does oscillate and it moves, it gives the water in the spot time to soak into the ground. So most of your water, it will only spray in one section for a short time, and most of your water is staying there and soaking into the ground. So the next type we have is bubblers. Now, bubblers provide a really, really large amount of water, gently, but a large amount of water, and in a very short time. These work really great if you've got a confined space that you can just flood and then it can slowly soak in. So you don't have to run these for very long at all. If you've got a space that any type of slope that it's going to just run off, then the bubblers aren't what you need in that space, because it will flood that space and then the water is just going to run off and you're going to lose the water that you just used, and it's not going to be getting enough water in that spot. These are great for like flower beds and shrub areas that do usually have a border on them, and if they get a whole lot of water, it's going to keep the water in that space to actually water that plant. And you can usually increase or decrease the flow just by twisting the top of the bubbler, and it'll make the flow bigger or and heavier or smaller and less of a flow. And it's incredibly efficient. As you can see, it's about 90% efficient if it is a confined space. And if it's in that space that can be flooded and can let the water soak in, these can be really, really efficient irrigation system. So, but our most efficient irrigation type is drip irrigation. Now, drip irrigation, there's a lot of methods of installation, a lot of different kinds that you can install. I put this picture in because this is typically what people think of when they think of drip irrigation. Those hard black plastic pipes that you spread out that have got the little holes in them, and it's got the U-shaped stake, and you put it over the drip irrigation to hold it in place. They've got a lot of new technology in drip irrigation, actually, and there's some easier, newer ways to install it. And with this new technology, they're updated and oftentimes better than that simple black hose that you've got. A lot of times those black hoses, because they have the holes in them, they get clogged, and dirt will get into them, and it's harder to bury them because of that. And with the new systems, they have it so that they don't clog. And you can actually install those above ground like this one is, or you can even install it below ground. So you can dig a little trench and put it under the ground. They don't use a whole lot of water. It's very slow watering, but because it goes right to the plant better, and you're not losing any of the water from evaporation because of the spray might get evaporated depending on how hot it is or wind blowing and all. These actually run about 95% efficient. So they're incredibly efficient system of irrigation. And one of the great things about them is that because you can install it below ground, you can even like cover it up with mulch and you won't even know that it's there. Like you can't see it. And they're not perfect in every situation. Like if you're trying to irrigate a lawn, drip irrigation wouldn't really be the best idea for that because it's too big of an area and you just need more water in that area. But you can also install micro bubblers and micro sprayers. So the bubblers that we just talked about in the sprayers, smaller ones of that, like if you have a line of plants and you've got drip irrigation in those plants, and then you've got maybe one plant out of the way, then you can install a micro bubbler or sprayer that can attach to the drip irrigation line, but get that water out to it. All right, folks, this is our first chance to win one of those outdoor irrigation kits. So remember, you want to email your answers to angie.marcus@cobbcounty.org, and Chrissy has typed that into the chat box in case you missed the email address. Make sure you include your name and your mailing address. So our first two questions, and this will give you two chances to win our kit, is which is more efficient for watering, spray heads or drip? So spray heads or drip, which one's more efficient and why? Don't forget the why. Our second question is, what is hydrozoning and why is it important in irrigation? So think about those questions and make sure you get your answers in by 5 o'clock tonight to be entered in our drawings. All right, so we talked about some of the components of the irrigation system. Let's talk more about some of the smart technology and pieces that can make your system more efficient. So we talked a little bit in the beginning about the weather-based irrigation controllers they're basically controllers that use weather data to determine when to water your landscape. So they might receive the weather data with a wireless signal. So like a Wi-Fi signal from your house can transmit it to the weather controller, or some of them actually have on-site weather stations at your house that can send the data to the weather-based controller. And the benefit of that is that if you think about our area here in Cobb County, the closest like weather channel station is at the airport on the south side of Atlanta. The weather in the south side of Atlanta can be drastically different than the weather here. The weather across Cobb County can be drastically different. It sometimes is 4 or 5 inches of rain difference in the county. So the on-site weather stations give you the actual data for your yard and what is going on right then and there at your house. Now, they can also provide temperature readings and soil moisture readings. So if the temperature gets hot, it can give a little bit more irrigation that day during the time. So these irrigation controllers can run from pretty inexpensive to very expensive, depending on what type you get, what type of control you want, and how many bells and whistles you get, and what you want it to do. And no matter how smart this technology is, just like all of technology, all of these controllers are all about how you manage it. If you can have a standard controller, just a regular push button controller that you have to program, if it's managed well, it can be incredibly efficient. If you walk away from this smart irrigation controller and never look at it again and don't change it based on seasons and don't adjust it if it needs to be adjusted, it's not going to be very efficient at all either. But the benefit of the smart timers is a lot of them you can actually program in information specific to your landscape, such as your plant types, your soil type, what type of system you're using. Like, are you using spray heads? Are you using rotors? Are you using drip irrigations? You can program in different zones. And based on that data that you put in, along with the weather from the weather stations, it can actually control a lot more efficiently how it waters your landscape. And like I said, just because it's a smart technology, you still might have to fine tune it, change it a little bit to make it work as efficiently as you can. So high efficiency nozzles are another way that you can make your irrigation system much more efficient. So these are also called rotary spray nozzles. So if you think about that sprayer that we talked about earlier, they basically took a rotor, which is and a spray head, and combine them together to make a high efficiency nozzle. They spray a lot harder out, but you can also change the shape of the spray. So these work great in a corner because you can spray the actual lawn and not spray the concrete behind it. In a curved, you have a curved flower bed that you want to make sure it just hits that curve. It can work great for that. And depending on the bottle that you have, you might have a bigger adjustment amount as far as how much you spray and how far it can go. Now, these high efficiency nozzles, they run optimum at the very specific PSI of 40 PSIs. So that you need to make sure that it's got 40 PSIs into that spray nozzle. Well, how do you do that? So we've talked a lot about pressure and your pressure lines and how making sure you've got the right pressure and how these systems run the best on what level of pressure, and that high efficiency nozzle needs 40 PSIs. So how do you control the pressure in your line? And how do you, if you've got high pressure, which if you're in Cobb County, chances are the pressure in your line is high, and it's going to be higher than probably what's recommended for a lot of these. So there's two different ways you can control that. You can either have a pressure regulator at the valve in the system, so it's actually in the pipe and it controls the same pressure to the whole entire system. Or you can also install what's called a pressure regulating spray body. So that's the picture on the right, that's the blue on the top and the black on the bottom. These pressure regulating spray bodies, or PRS, so they are actually a rotary spray nozzle that we just talked about needs the 40 PSIs. So they actually make PRS bodies set to 40 PSIs. So what happens is that when the water comes in, it hits that part that looks like the coil in the middle of that, and it will actually regulate the pressure that comes out to exactly 40 PSIs. They also sell these for 35 PSIs. And then you just screw in the sprinkler head on the top. So as it comes out, it might come into the pressure regulating body at a really high pressure, but that regulator valve inside of it actually reduces the pressure, and it comes out the right pressure, and so it's not deteriorating the inside of your system, and you're not wasting water, and you've actually got your sprinkler system at the right pressure. All right, so we are to chance number 2 to win one of our outdoor conservation kits. So our 2 questions are, what do weather-based irrigation controllers do? What are they for? What do they do? And our second question is, where are 2 places you can have pressure regulators in your irrigation system? So what are those 2 places that you might have pressure irrigation systems? And remember, include your full name and your mailing address, and email those answers to angie.marcus@cobbcounty.org. And again, check the chat box if you didn't catch that. All right, when it comes to irrigation systems, it all relies on maintenance. Maintenance is key. You can have the best, most efficient irrigation system installed, top of the line, everything's perfect. But if you walk away from it and ignore it, over time, it's going to start to deteriorate and it's going to start to decline, and your performance levels are going to drop dramatically. Over time, it's like I said, there's lots of little pieces in there. Things break, you might not notice it, you might not pay attention to it. So take the time to do a walkthrough of your sprinkler system, particularly before you turn it on in the spring, first time of the season that you're going to use it. Turn it on. Our sprinkler systems are usually programmed to come on earlier in the morning. A lot of times we don't even see our sprinkler systems come on. They just come on and they do their jobs. So you may not know that you've got a problem with it. So take the time, go outside, turn on the sprinkler system, walk around it, do a walkthrough, make some notes. Is anything broken? Is anything not working? Or are there any other problems with it? And get those things repaired. If you're not comfortable doing that yourself, then you can get a certified irrigation specialist to come in and do those repairs for you. or if you're not comfortable with it or you're not really familiar with it, you can have somebody come in, but you can give them a good idea of what you need done. And it's also a good time at once or twice a month to take a look at your irrigation system, make sure nothing's broken, but also is there anywhere that you can retrofit anything in that to make it better? Has things changed in your yard? Have you lost a tree and now you need more water in this spot and you need to change out that sprinkler head and put in a different type of sprinkler head? So to make it more efficient and make it better, do those walkarounds and make sure you fix those problems. The sprinkler fun or waste? Kids running in the sprinkler system, let's be honest, anybody running and playing in the sprinkler system is lots and lots of fun. But the other two pictures, not so much fun. So how many times have we seen this from an irrigation system? Driving down the street and you see a little mini geyser coming out of a sprinkler head, or you see spray and it's misting and you get all of that mist and it's going everywhere. And again, a lot of times the sprinkler systems come on when we don't see them. They come on early in the mornings. We may not notice it. So you might not even know that that's what your sprinkler system looks like. So we were talking about high pressure. You can, when your sprinklers have got too high of pressure, you can look and it kind of looks like it's foggy or it's misty. That's telling you that those spray heads have got too high of pressure coming through them. And how do we fix that? Well, like we said earlier, you can either install a pressure regulator at either the valve or install one of those pressure regulating bodies. What happens is that when the water can drift in the wind. So when the wind comes up, if the water's in the air, it's going to blow it away. Or it can even, depending on how hot it is, evaporate before it even hits the ground if it's that really fine mist. So another problem you might have is your sprinkler heads are too low. If it's buried in the grass, it's only going to water a very, very small spot. Or sometimes they can even be buried in the mulch. Like if you keep adding mulch to your flower bed, it can get buried. And so you're going to either need to buy a higher pop-up, because those pop-ups will pop up different heights, so buy a higher pop-up, or you can have a swing arm and put it on a swing arm. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's an arm with a sprinkler on the end, and you can move it around and you can raise it up, and you can actually install the sprinkler onto that so you can raise it up if you need to. You might also have missing nozzles or broken bodies, not your broken bodies, but the broken sprinkler bodies. So if a nozzle's missing or broken, depending on how long you're running your system, you could be wasting 15 to 20 gallons per minute. If you're running that sprinkler system for 10 or 15 minutes, you're going to be wasting a ton of water. And if you've got anything like this, the two pictures here, if you've got that going on, you need to repair it as soon as possible or turn off the spring. If you can't get it done right away, you might just have to turn off the irrigation system until you can get it repaired, because not only are you wasting money and you can have some serious erosion problems from pressure that high, but also further down the system, you're going to lose the pressure because all the pressure is going to that one spot. You're going to lose the pressure, and so it's not going to be working as efficiently further down the sprinkler system, further down the irrigation line. So you want to make sure you get that fixed as fast as possible. Another common problem is clogged heads or nozzles. And nozzles, all you have to do is remove the nozzle and clean the screen out. So all nozzles come with the screen inside of them. So you can unscrew it, pull that filter screen out, wash it off, or you can just buy a new one if you can't get it really clean. And that will help to get the water flowing more freely, like if you think of something and like a river, and as the water flows through it, if it gets clogged up, that water is not going to be able to get through it. And your sprinkler heads are exactly the same. So you want to make sure those are clean. Another example is plant interference. And that's a great picture for that. If you've got lots of plants and you've got a sprinkler head, because sometimes this is where it comes in what we were talking about, adapting your irrigation system if you need to. If you put in some plants or the plants grow, people will put in irrigation systems and never look at them again. Well, then plants grow up and they grow around it. And that irrigation system is watering not what it needs to be watering, not what it's designed to water, and not what it's supposed to be watering. It's watering that one little plant. it can cause some serious runoff, and those plants aren't getting the water that they need. So spray head nozzles, if you look at this picture, it's in a flower bed and shrubs and bushes. Spray head nozzles are meant for overhead irrigations, like turf areas where it's open. If they're spraying out and they're just hitting that plant, the water's not getting out. So if you have plants in an area that are blocking the head, you might convert to that drip irrigation that we talked about. And that would be a great idea because it's not, you can spread the irrigation out more. Or if it's an enclosed area where it's okay to flood and you're not going to have the runoff, that bubbler might be a great idea to install in that area. All right, our last questions, your last chance to win our irrigation, our outdoor conservation kit here. So our two questions are, what are two common irrigation system problems? Okay, that's the first one. And the second question is, what is key when managing sprinkler systems? What is key in managing your irrigation and sprinkler systems? So don't forget, email me those answers and make sure to include your full name and your mailing address, and we will get those out in the mail to you. And if you answered all 6 questions, then you have got 6 chances to enter those sprinkler irrigation kits. So we are got just a couple of minutes, and I want to give you some more resources that we've got. And Chrissy's actually going to put these into the chat box as well. These are some great resources for a little bit more information, because this was a really, really kind of brief, quick introduction to it, just some really quick ideas of some problems you might have. And the resources here, we've got 3. The Alliance for Water Efficiency, and they've got some great resources for outdoor irrigation. And WaterSense, the EPA is WaterSense is an EPA program that focuses on efficient products. So when you go out and you look at, if you need some new sprinkler heads, if you want to get those WaterSense labeled timers, the WaterSense labeled sprinkler heads, they ensure that those are more efficient. And the landscapeforlife.org is also a great resource for ideas for some plants and pollinators and getting your landscape to what it needs to be based on your conditions. So those are some great resources. So if you have a question and you can't, or if you think of a question, feel free to email it to me. If you've got a question, we've got like 2 more minutes left. So if you've got a question, you can type it in the chat box and we will try to get that answered. And again, that was a really, really quick, brief introduction to your sprinkler system and some of the problems you might have and some ways that you can make it more efficient and get it. Hopefully, with some of those ideas, your sprinkler system will work for you and help you out and be efficient and not have you wasting water. And like I said, if you're wasting water, then you're also wasting money on that water bill. So we just want to make it work as fast as we can. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we really, really appreciate it. And we have got some more resources on our website, cobbstreams.org, and we've got some upcoming programs that we have, and Chrissy's typing that website into the chat box as well. We are actually starting to do some programs in person with smaller numbers and starting some of our community service programs, and you can find those on our website. She's also typing in the YouTube channel that in case you missed something or you didn't catch something that I was talking about, she's got the YouTube channel in the chat box as well that you can click on that, and it should be up in just a couple of days. It takes a little bit of time to edit it and get it in there. But I really, really appreciate y'all joining us, and we hope that you join us next month for our next Lunch and Learn, which is about pond plankton and all that there is. You can register for that from our website too, cobbstreams.org. Okay, thank y'all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great day, rest of the day, and enjoy that great weather out there. Have a great day.